Hello, Diamond. How are you?
I'm awesome. How are you?
Doing very well, thank you. It's Friday, right? Which is always a good thing. Yes, snaps for Friday. We're both on the East Coast. The weather has been very nice here, especially considering what a lot of people just south of you are dealing with. So much they've got going on. So always feeling very fortunate and feeling very fortunate to talk to you this afternoon too.
Yes, same, same, same,
Yeah.
same. Like, some people they could complain like it's been musty, it's been dreary, it's been
Right.
just like kind of cool, but it's like, but we didn't have hurricane touch us.
Right, exactly, and all that devastation. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I like to start off with just the quick plug. So, Coach Diamond Drip, diamonddripconsulting.com is where people can find you. I know a lot about human-centered design because I've worked in environments where we've focused on human-centered design. I know nothing about human design. Other than I know it's like a synthesis of some ancient and modern systems, excuse me. But that's about all I know, right? So I'm really excited to learn a bunch of stuff from you today. I think it's going to be really fun. But before we jump into human design, maybe we'll just jump into Diamond and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I come from a long background of just overcoming adversity and
Mm,
life handing me different moments where I could have chose to break,
yep.
or I could
Right.
have chose to see the possibility and chase that instead
Hmm.
of devastation.
Right.
And I would say that some of those choices, they led me to where I am today. Like, uh, so many times I get asked the question when it comes to, I participated in a clinical trial that used psilocybin to heal
Oh,
my
sure.
depression
Yep.
in August of 2022.
Mm,
And there are people who ask me, they're like, oh, like, how did you have the courage to
right. To
go
actually
and,
do that. Yeah.
yeah, to,
Yeah, and that was an interesting time too, because we were like kind of pandemic, but not pandemic, kind of coming out of it, right? But still a
yes.
lot of fear
Yeah.
throughout, our society, throughout people. So that was a brave thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would say that that trial was really the catalyst moment for me because
Mm,
it allowed me to be able to get into the hard wiring of my brain, because we
yeah.
all know that the brain, we think things repeatedly, they become beliefs, and then we hold
Right.
on to those beliefs and we impose limitations on ourselves based on those beliefs that
Right.
we've learned. And so the trial helped me to see the areas where I was holding myself back, where I wasn't being fully myself. I didn't know how to bring the higher consciousness me that I
Mm,
experienced in the trial experience into my everyday life.
sure. Sure.
I'm
'Cause it's one thing to do it during the confines of the trial, right? It's
yeah,
another thing to take that now back to, I got to do this every day.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And so I stumbled for a while after the
Mm,
trial, trying to
mm.
figure out how to do that. And it was when I found these tools that we'll discuss later that I was able to actually tie all of the pieces of the puzzle together and actually see the fullness of possibility that I could be stepping into.
Interesting. Interesting. I like that I don't want to oversimplify it, Diamond, right? But I like that you kind of had this almost watershed moment, right? This where you kind of realized that this was the path that you were going to take. Um and how did that feel? I mean, was it at one time like relieving but also terrifying? Was it like how did that make you feel, I guess?
So the trial, are you talking about the trial that
Yeah, 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 kind of the trial. Yeah, yeah.
so I had experimented with holistic medicine, making
Mm,
my own meds before. I had even dabbled into psilocybin. But
okay.
one of the things that I always say is that the trial showed me everything that I was doing wrong
Yeah.
recreationally.
Right, right.
And I remember I was very one-track minded for a majority of the trial
Mhm.
because in order to participate, you have to not be on anything mind altering. So
Sure.
if I was on like SSRIs, antidepressants, I would have
Right.
had that weaning off, tapering off period.
Sure.
By the time that I participated in the trial, I was already into holistic remedies. So the one thing
Gotcha.
that I did have to give up and process out of my system was THC from having
Sure.
my medical marijuana card.
Yeah.
And for weeks, I was just worried about passing the drug tests. And I was like, I
That's
was
enough anxiety right there, right? Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
I was like, because if if I don't pass, then I
Yeah.
can't
They won't
participate.
let me participate. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. And I know that, THC is one of those substances that stays in your
Yeah.
system
Well,
for
it
a
stays in your
long
system for
time.
a long time, a month, maybe longer, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when it came down to like I think it was the second to last drug test that I had to go in for, and it was like, you're still clear, you're good. I was like, oh, awesome. Oh, snap. I'm about to be like in a room with
Yeah.
people
Right.
doing this experience sober,
Right.
like completely sober. And I've never done this before.
Yeah.
What
So
if I have,
what if I
there's,
can't? Yeah.
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 I like to say there's no such thing as a bad trip, but like, what if I have a challenging trip? Like,
Sure.
what if I don't come back?
Right.
And then I had this moment where like, so I participated in a trial to help
Right.
me feel better, but I also participated in the trial so that I felt confidently that it was going to be a success so that I could be a diverse face talking about psilocybin and
Right.
psychedelics and what they can do for you, because
Right.
there's so many people in my network and my culture who don't believe that magic mushrooms are for
Mhm.
them. They
Right.
believe it's like hippie,
Right.
Woodstock.
Right. Did that in college. Don't do it now. Right. Yeah.
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 And I'm
Yeah.
like, no, this is actually medicine.
Yeah.
And so when I had that moment of realization that this was actually about to happen, I was like, okay, like one, you're already here. So
Sure.
like just keep going
Keep
through.
going.
Like,
Yeah.
that's what the rest of the trial is for if you do have a challenging trip, like so that you have support to help you
Get through it. Yep.
get through it.
Yep.
But also it was like there's other things that are coming from this. Like
Mm.
I knew that that trip wasn't going to be my last psilocybin trip because I knew that I wanted to take what I learned in the clinical trial setting and see if it was replicatable at home so that I
Right.
could give tips for people because not everyone qualifies for a clinical trial.
Right. Right. Yeah. Some people, or they don't have the time or whatever. There's so many confounding factors. Right. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I already knew that the trial wasn't the end. It was really
Mm.
the beginning for having a strong foundation of information to stand on
Right.
without like spending months and years in certifications for like social work and therapy and stuff. It
Right.
was like
Right.
I went through the science version of
Yeah.
how this works.
Yeah. We talked to someone a long time ago on the show about there's a lot of neuroscience behind happiness.
Mhm.
Right. And I know you do so much more than just sort of like make people happy. But there's a lot that you do in terms of um helping individuals kind of, I love this notion you have of creating shine and other things. So maybe what we can do next, Diamond, is just talk a little bit about some of the core service offerings that you do through your work.
Yeah, it is my absolute joy to help people rediscover and reawaken to who they actually are and not who
Mm.
they were conditioned to be.
Mm.
From the moment that we are born, from the moment, we take our first breath and we go home with our parents, we're in their energetic aura field.
Corpus. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so, we're learning from them, and there are certain areas in our energetic makeup where we don't have, in human design, we call it definition, where you don't
Mm.
have definition there. You don't have an energetic buffer there. So
Right.
you just take in energy from your environment and it becomes amplified in you. And that's where a lot of the beliefs that we have, they stem from, right? We learn things, sayings that our parents say, that our grandparents say,
So
that our
many times.
family,
Yeah.
right?
And it goes beyond that. You pick up their ticks and their expressions and their gestures and right? It's
everything.
I
And
think
then
about that a lot. I see like so much of my dad coming out of me as I get older, right? So much. And I think about when we were kids, and I look at a friend of mine and I think about how he used to make a certain face. And then I remember, oh, his mother made that same expression, right?
mhm,
Those kinds of things. Yeah.
exactly. And then we get older and then we make friends.
Right.
And then our friends influence us and they're
Sure.
like, oh, you shouldn't do that. Boys have cootie. Like all the things,
All the
right? Some stuff we grow out of, some stuff we keep with
Some
us.
stuff we keep forever. Yeah.
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 And then, of course, the biggest one, society.
Yeah.
It is constantly giving us,
Do
out.
this, don't do that. This is
Yeah.
okay. This is not okay. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. And so when we hear things repeated over time and we're constantly thinking these things turn into beliefs.
Mm,
And then we get stuck in these patterns of limitation. We get stuck in this mindset of scarcity, like, oh, I could never do that because, they've done so many awesome things before they got to this point, and I've
right.
only done this. And we get caught in this comparison. And so, one of the joys of the service that I provide to people is helping them understand what is intrinsic, internal to them, like what is something that they authentically believe and know to be
Mm,
true,
mhm.
and what's something that they've learned from their environment, from their childhood trauma, from all of the trauma that we experience on a day to day, and how can they reduce the outside noise
Yeah.
and actually listen to, but not just listen to and hear, but trust it. Because
Right.
that's the other piece. Like, there are so many of my clients who I'll read their energy and I'll talk through them, talk to them through some of their gifts and getting them to a place of understanding. And they're like, I knew that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but you didn't trust it.
You didn't trust it. Yeah. You knew it, but you put it over here,
Yeah.
right? For whatever reason.
Yeah. And so it's getting them to a place of understanding and trust in their gifts, in their full potential, because there are
Mhm.
so many times we put a cap on what's possible for
Sure.
us because of the energy that we take in. So whether it's through one-off readings, whether it's through packages, I do have a coaching program. Like, these are things, these are services that I offer and I love, because even if someone doesn't do any of the paid offerings, I get joy when I
Sure.
see that someone has actually pulled their free chart on my site. And
Yeah.
I'm like, that's somebody who now knows more about themselves
And they
today.
did. Yeah, yesterday. Yep.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's great. I'm very intrigued, Diamond, by how you kind of walk this alignment between, like you said, the work that you're doing as a coach, or a reading you might do for someone, and helping them kind of get and think about some spiritual alignments or other things, and then how that kind of crosses into the business realm, right? Sort of the role of visual identity
Mhm.
and empowering you to be a better business owner or a better entrepreneur. I'm very curious about how that works.
Yeah. So I found human design at a moment where I was I don't want to say masquerading as a business coach, but like that's what it feels like now, because I really
Yeah,
wanted to do
looking
this
back.
purpose.
Yeah.
Right. I really wanted to do this really meaningful purpose clarity work. But I was limiting myself to what was measurable and
Mm,
attainable.
mm,
So, being able to help people create logos and websites and automation into their business. And now I still do those things, but I start with them knowing who they are first, because when we don't know ourselves and trust in our ability to make decisions, every single one of us has a unique strategy and authority for
right.
how
And a
we are,
unique voice, right? Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
for how we're meant to make our best, most aligned decisions. And
Mm,
so when I get them to understand how to start experimenting and actually trusting, like getting
mm.
out of their head, getting into their body and trusting that wisdom that's there, then we start talking about how to build an online presence that
Mm,
actually matches that. We start
mm,
talking about how they can start getting visible, whether
mm.
it's through interviews like this, whether it's through having a YouTube channel, whether it's through social
Right.
media and what they're presenting to the world as their brand. We want to make sure that they know who they are so that they show up consistently in that way.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
Otherwise, they're just getting caught up in whatever the next new thing is. Like
Sure.
everyone knows about AI, and
Right.
everyone's like, I need this new AI tool. And I'm like, but do you though?
Right.
You need to spend more time learning this other tool when you have
Right.
systems in place that
Right.
actually work for you.
Right. Yeah. Let's walk backwards. Let's kind of reevaluate a little bit here. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. You have done so much as a coach. And I do wonder a little bit about the tough days around, clients where you've had to kind of give them a little bit of a wake up call, right? Or, some hard advice that you've had to give them. How do you bet? Because this, I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, Diamond, but this seems like a very sort of soft approach that you do with folks, right? It seems very empathetic, very integrated, and hands on, but when you have to do you have to give people sort of the hard advice sometimes as part of this?
So there are times where I do have to give like that wake up call, like you say.
Yeah.
A
Yeah.
lot of my approach is very empathetic.
Mm.
I play to some of my strengths, which I have the gate of nurturing in my chart. So
Yeah.
being that listener who's able to reflect back to them and with care. But one of the things that contributes to like the difficult days is
Mm.
actually recognizing how they've been stuck in a pattern for longer than they actually believe that they've been stuck
Yeah,
in a
right.
pattern.
Or are willing to accept, right?
Exactly. And
Acknowledge. Yeah.
yeah, and that's where I really lean into the Gene Keys
Mm.
tool that I use with clients more
Talk
than
more
I
about
do
that,
people.
please.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
Gene Keys, it looks more closely into the gates of human design.
Mhm.
In Gene Keys, they're called keys. And so we know, especially with more science that's being published with like about quantum physics, that we vibrate. Like we are energetic beings and
Yeah.
we
Sure.
vibrate at
Even
different
when we're still.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so Gene Keys looks at the different frequencies of how each of these keys show up
Mm.
in our being.
Right.
And so a lot of times it's recognizing and accepting the areas where they've lived in the shadow frequency, because there's a shadow, there's a
Sure.
gift, and then there's like the highest
Highest
frequency,
frequency.
yeah,
Yeah.
which is called the city. And the founder of Gene Keys, he talks about how we should really be spending 90% of our time in
Mhm.
our gift or
Mhm.
in like the higher
Higher the
states,
city. Yeah.
and like
Yeah.
really only like 10% in
In
the
the shadow.
shadows.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's getting them to acknowledge that piece. Like first
Mm.
they have to acknowledge the shadow, because it's especially with how it's worded sometimes. Like one in my brand sphere, I have the shadow of immaturity.
Mm.
And as a grown
Yeah.
woman
For a moment,
who,
you're like, I'm not immature.
right,
Yeah.
I've been through stuff like, but when you listen to the contemplation of it or you read the Gene Keys book, you start to understand that immaturity is really just being in this place of external fixation, like
Mm.
always wanting to be validated by someone else. And we know through our conditioning that the school system doesn't really help that. Because
Sure.
literally we're just like, this is my work. Is it an
Is it
A?
good?
Is
Is it
it
an A or an F? Tell me. Yeah.
right? Is
Yeah.
it good?
Yeah.
And then we take
Oh, and
that
by the way, it's, you're the only person who's been appointed to tell me that.
right. And so we get into this habit and we take it with us into adulthood. And so
Yeah.
for me, I had to recognize like, oh, because the definition in Gene Keys of immaturity is moving from this place of external fixation
Mm.
to a place of internal groundedness.
Sure.
And when you do that, you're able to hit the next level, which is expansion.
Mm.
And it makes sense because when you are constantly waiting for someone to validate you, you're going to hold yourself back.
Of
You're not
course.
going to.
Only natural. Yeah, it's only natural. Yeah, absolutely. Let
But
me, yeah,
yeah,
I was gonna say, my mind is racing. So let me ask you this question. And when you talked about sort of the shadows and the city, or shadows, and then there was the next gate. I can't remember what it was called. I'm
gift.
sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Shadow,
and then
gift, and city.
in city. And is there? and you, like you said, some when people are in their city, I'm sure they're giving off crazy amounts of energy, right? But some people can't consume that, right? So is it both like an awakening to project it, but also to receive it? Does it go both ways, I guess? Am I making
So
sense?
kind of. So
Yeah.
yes. So it's one thing like from the environment. So it's Gene Keys really is more internal, personal.
I gotcha.
Of course, you do put energy out, and that comes from like the different energy
Yeah.
centers in human design. But
Mm,
Gene Keys, I think, is more personal. So it's more of
got it.
that personal unlocking that happens. Where, so for example, with the 53, it's immaturity, expansion, and then superabundance. And so it's looking at, like, especially with the word abundance, we have so many connotations culturally, societally
Right.
attached to abundance.
Abundance.
Like
Right.
it
Yeah.
means having a bunch of stuff, it means
Right.
having,
Yeah.
money, all the things. And so
And there's
when you
positive and negative connotations to that, right? Yeah.
exactly. And so when you're able to, at the base level, be in this place of internal groundedness, you're able to redefine what abundance looks like for you, because there are
Mm,
so many different ways that we can be abundant. There's health abundance, of
mhm.
course there's financial,
Sure.
there's time, like there's so many,
Energy. So,
right?
yeah, energy of abundance.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
so it's that kind of personal recognition of
Mm,
seeing like, okay, if I do stop living in these shadows, if I do expand past what I believed based on the shadow was possible, then I can reach these higher frequencies. I can be in, and this is pulling in human design, I can be in my signature theme. So for me as a generator, is satisfaction.
yeah.
For projectors, is success. For
Mhm.
manifestors, is peace.
Mm,
So how can I usher in these feelings?
feelings, yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. I just find it searching because I know there are people in my life that when I see them or when they walk into a room, honestly, Diamond, they're like radiators just shooting out heat. Like you can feel it. Right? And then there are some other people that don't exhibit any of that, right? And I'm kind of wondering, like, are we trained to even recognize that? Or are we also, and when I say trained, I mean like subconsciously
Yeah.
trained, right? To recognize or to ignore it, right? Or, because maybe you learned as a child, like those people are hyper, or those people are, right? So they're not people you want to be around. So it's such an interesting
Yeah.
concept. Yeah.
So that brings it back to human design. So we do
Mm,
actually feel human design is all about the auras. And
right.
so with the profile line specifically, there are different things, like even the energetic centers, and this comes into like where opposites attract. Like
Yeah.
we can sense whether someone has like definition in an area where we don't.
Mm,
And I'll use the spleen, for example. So the spleen is an awareness center. It is a center where we hold a lot of fears. It's one of the oldest awareness centers in the body. And
mm.
so when someone does not have definition in this area and they meet someone who does, they get this feeling of safety when
Huh.
they're around this person. And that's when like certain codependent habits can start to
But
come into play, because
take
even
effect.
if the
Yeah,
person, yeah, even if the person starts treating them badly, they're like, but I feel safe here. And
sure,
they want to
sure.
hold on to that. There are different profile lines that put off different auras. There's 6 profile lines and there's 12 different combinations of those. And
Mm,
so my profile is a 5-1. And so the 5 line, my aura projects that I have solutions for people. Like
mm.
I have this like challenge solver energy. And sometimes someone will sense that and they'll be right about what it is that I can help them with.
Wow.
Sometimes they're like, "Oh, I feel like you can help me." And I'm like, "I actually can't."
Can't. Interesting.
And
Yeah.
I've met other 5 lines. Like I met this projector who was a 5 line, and he was like, he went to a different country. He didn't know the
Mm,
language at all. And
mm.
he was stopped like 3 times in a day and like asked something in this completely different language. And he's like, I have no idea. Like, I'm just
Yeah.
visiting.
Yeah,
He
but
was like,
people they thought that he was part of that, right? That almost like
yeah,
part of the fabric. He blended in so well, or he assimilated so well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. You know the concept, Diamond, of how like people who are therapists
Mhm.
need to have a therapist to turn to because they need someone to unload on when they are taking in everyone else's challenges. So you're spending a lot of time helping your clients transform their confidence, their success, but you also have to be the creative mind and the strategist behind what you are doing. So where do you get your sort of respite from, Diamond?
Yeah. So, as much as I love human design and have learned a lot about myself through it, it's hard because it gives you insight into like your superpowers. It gives you
Yeah.
insight into what's possible for you. And it transcends like what you've seen growing up or what you've seen
Mm,
culturally. And so there were certain things in my chart that I found really hard to accept. And so
sure.
I had to reach out to a coach,
Yeah.
and I enlisted in a package with her, and I was like, help, like she had this thing called like your success codex. And I was like, tell me how I'm supposed to talk to people based on
Right.
my gifts, because like
Right.
it's saying I got a lot of good stuff in here that can work for me.
Sure.
However, it doesn't feel like it's working for me. So,
Yeah.
and
Interesting.
it
Yeah.
was because I was in my own way. Like I
Mm,
would read something that would say like you were designed, like I'd read like two or three gates that say like you're designed to like succeed on the material plane. Like you're
gotcha.
literally designed to be successful. And I'd be like, yeah, but it doesn't feel that way though. Marketing is hard.
It is hard. Yeah.
and and so I needed someone to be like, no, this is you. Like I would
Right.
read it and I'd be like, okay, it says this is me, but I don't really believe it. But then
Right.
having someone else who has spent, X number of hours, help X number of clients with the very tool that I believe wholeheartedly, and
Mm.
they say it and it's like, oh yeah, it's different when you say it. Like you said it and I got it. But when I read it, it was like, yeah.
Yeah, not so much. Yeah, you need to hear it from another person and appreciate their intonation or the way they explained it to you, right? Or the energy in which they delivered it to you, all those things, right?
Yeah.
So this might be a good segue into Diamond the entrepreneur. We talked for a couple minutes about your day today. But talk to me about a kind of typical day in the life of you as an entrepreneur.
Yeah. So I'm full transparency, figuring out what that looks like in
Yeah.
alignment, because I know what it looked like when I was shooting myself into things.
Right.
And it looked like constant to-do lists, constant busy
Mhm.
work, not doing a lot of the things that I actually love and allow me to be creative.
Sure.
And now I am working with my energy. Now
Yeah.
there's a to-do list. The to-do list doesn't go anywhere.
Right, right, right.
But I'm able to assess what is priority, what needs to be done, and I'm able to schedule things on there. So today I had an in-person networking event. Like you said, we were
Yep.
talking about this. And today was one of those days where everything just kind of clicked. It was like
Mm.
I freed myself from all of the things that I felt like I should. Like I envisioned getting up early this morning so that I could attack my to-do list before the event. But instead, did things that were on a different to-do list. It was more like family stuff. It was more like, okay, I
Sure.
need to take care of these things.
All stuff that still needs to get done.
All still stuff. It just
Yeah,
wasn't what I was going to get up early to do.
to do, right. But sometimes that's what happens, right?
Yeah.
And I'm assuming, Diamond, you give yourself grace, you allow that to happen, you don't get too concerned about it, right?
Yeah. Because at the end of the day, and my partner would say this to me, he's like, you're the only person who knows what's on your to-do list. Like
Right.
no one is,
Right.
you're not at
Yeah.
a job where someone's like, these are your responsibilities for today.
Right.
Like get
And
it
then
done.
report back to me at the end of the day as to how many of these you.
Exactly.
Oh, and by the way, when you're going to come back and tell me you think you got something done, and I'm going to tell you, no, you're really not finished.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially,
Yeah.
especially as an entrepreneur. You're like, I'm finished, I'm complete. And then you learn something else, right? Information.
Yep.
And you're
Absolutely.
like, dang, I gotta go back to the drawing board on this.
Exactly. Yeah.
But today was one of those days where I listened to that internal voice and things just kind of clicked. Like I've been trying to do this thing where I do the opposite of whatever Diamond would do, because for a long time, Diamond would make herself small and not take up space, like all of the things. And it was because I was struggling with my own like self-esteem, self-worth. Like, do I really belong at the table? All the things from imposter syndrome.
Imposter. Yep. Absolutely. Yeah.
Exactly.
So many folks struggle from that, but especially women entrepreneurs like yourself.
Yes. And so today I unboxed my books that I just got in. And I was like, ooh, these look great. And I want to take them to the group because there are some people who have been in the meetings as I've talked about, I'm about to become an author. And so like previous Diamond would have just left the books at home, took pictures, talked about the book, but whatever. I had this feeling. I was like, I want to like show it.
I want to have it. Yeah.
I want to have it there with me. And it was funny because when I got there, and this is why you have to have that like internal place of groundedness. When I got there, the receptionist was like, "Oh, is that all you brought?" And I was like, "Yeah, these books are heavy." Like, actually, I only brought like 8 books. And she's like, "Oh." And for a second, I would have doubted whether that was enough. But instead, I was able to be like, well, if they want the book, like there's a link that they can
get
to purchase it and I can ship it. And honestly, sometimes I prefer it that way because I encourage people who buy the book to pull their chart and send me what their biggest goal is so that I can personalize that message when I autograph the book. So like, I'm like, either way, they're going to get this quality thing. And sure enough, it was enough books. And I actually sold 4 of them. And I was like, oh, this is awesome, actually. Listening to myself.
I find again so interesting what you just said about like the old you or the counterintuitive you or however you put it, which is much more graceful than I'm putting it right now, wouldn't have brought the books, right? You would have left them at home. Maybe you would have taken a photo of them, whatever. I've been there, right? Because you feel like this is stupid. Like I'm going to bring this and I'm going to look stupid or people are going to, so really like finding your way through that and to the other side and bringing in those 8 copies and selling 4 copies. Like that's pretty remarkable.
That's the power of that internal groundedness that I'm working on. So absolutely. I try and make more of my days look like that.
If you had to distill, Diamond, kind of what you do into, let's just call it a statement or a motto, or is there something that you've kind of been conjuring on that kind of expresses that to people?
Yeah. So the one thing that I'll say to people is the limit does not exist, but fear and self-doubt will make you believe that it does. So you have to be able to challenge your beliefs and let go of what's not serving you.
So it's I like what you just said though about like, the fear will make you believe that there are limits. Right. And how do you work past that? Yeah. Is there someone on a large scale that we would all recognize, Diamond, that you currently find sort of super inspiring, and maybe you can tell us why you find that when you look at that person or you draw inspiration from them?
Yeah. So one person that I think, especially if you like Google human design, you'll find her name is Karen Curry Parker. And so there's traditional human design, which that language came from the founder, Ra Uru Hu, back in the 80s.
Right.
But Karen Curry Parker has coined this quantum human design.
Interesting.
And so it brings in more of those quantum physics pieces. And it talks about how the energy centers are actually associated with different parts of the body. And so you can actually trace pain and different things that you're feeling in your body to like specific gates. And when you start to like really become into alignment with those gifts, you can actually transform your health in really cool ways. And I forget if she has a defined heart. I don't think that she does, but
Okay.
and I say that that's important because people who don't have definition in their heart, they think that they have something to prove. Like they're
Right.
constantly trying to prove that they belong, that they're worthy, that they're valuable. And so she has gone through a lot of certifications, studying with Ra himself before he passed. She
Interesting.
has published like PhD papers about how
Mm,
this shows up in the body. Like she's done all the stuff to prove like this is real. And
right.
so she's someone that I look up to because she also talks about how that was what she did. That's
Right.
not what you have to do in
Right.
order to really start to access these tools. Like that was just how
She
she
did
did.
it.
Yeah.
Right. Right. But that is that individual that kind of manifests so much of this for you. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. I noticed that you wear an infinity symbol.
Mhm.
What does that mean to you, Diamond?
Yeah, so this it's actually inscribed with my daughter's name and her birth date
Oh,
and then mine. And so I originally got it just because of that infinite love that we have.
between parent and child. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
Sure.
But as I open myself up more to the spiritual side of things, it took on new greater meanings, like even understanding that like her destiny number and mine, like it actually creates this loop.
Oh.
Yeah, so it called to me because I wanted something with her birthday on it, and
Mm.
my circle necklace had broken. And then it just continues to find new ways to have meaning.
Yeah, I love that. That just like how it's infinite, it is infinite in the new types of meaning that it brings to you, right?
Yeah.
Beautiful. That's wonderful. We have been talking to Coach Diamond Drip, diamonddripconsulting.com. Thank you so much for coming on and helping us understand a little bit more about human design and all of these really important and fascinating things that you're working on. And we hope to stay in touch with you.
I am looking forward to staying in touch with you.
Have a great rest of your day.
You too.